You know, a lot of people think of a real estate contract as just a piece of paper, but it's not. It's more like a living thing. It has a birth, a life, and sometimes a pretty dramatic death. Today, we're going to follow that entire journey, from the moment it's signed all the way to settlement. So, you did it. You found the perfect place. Your offer was accepted. Everyone signed on the dotted line. Feels like you can pop the champagne, right? Well, not so fast. The truth is, this is really just the beginning of the story. That time between signing and closing, that's where things can get very, very interesting. All right, let's start right at the beginning, that moment of creation. This is where our contract is officially born, and it immediately enters its first, and usually its longest, phase of life. The second that ink is dry, or that e-signature is clicked, the contract becomes executory. Just think of that word as meaning in progress. Promises have been made, for sure, but they haven't been kept yet. The buyer still needs to secure that loan, the inspector has to do their thing, the seller needs to prove the title is clear. All the real work is just getting started. Okay, here's a classic trip-up, and you will absolutely see this on a real estate exam. We use the verb to execute when we mean to sign. So it seems logical that when you execute a contract, it becomes an executed contract, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? Well, here's the twist. The act of executing the document, the signing part, is what actually creates the executory or in-progress contract. Think of the signing as the starting gun for a race, not the ribbon you break at the finish line. So let's nail this down once and for all. Executory means in progress. Executed means finished, done, complete. It's only after every single promise has been fulfilled, the money's changed hands, the deed is delivered, only then at the closing table can we call that contract fully executed. So, our contract is born, but is it a healthy baby? Just because a document is signed doesn't automatically mean it's legally sound. From the get-go, we have to check its vital signs to see if it can even survive the journey to closing. In a perfect world, what you have is a valid contract. This is the goal. It has all the essential legal ingredients: competent parties, mutual consent, a legal purpose. It's the real deal, and it's enforceable in court. This is your green light. Then you have the complete opposite, a void contract. And this isn't just a flawed contract. This thing was never legally alive to begin with. It's missing a core element, usually a legal purpose. I mean, think about a contract to sell a house for an illegal gambling operation. From a legal perspective, that paper is a ghost. It never existed. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, the voidable contract. This one looks and feels totally valid, but one party has a secret get-out-of-jail-free card. The classic example is a contract signed with a minor. The minor can choose to cancel the contract anytime they want. But you, the adult on the other side, you're stuck if they decide to go through with it. It's a one-way escape hatch. And finally, we have the sneakiest one of all, the unenforceable contract. This one is tricky because it might have all the right pieces of a valid deal, but there's a fatal procedural flaw. If you try to take it to a judge, they'll refuse to even hear the case. And in real estate, there is one main reason this happens. And that reason is the statute of frauds. This is a huge deal. It's a very old legal principle that basically says for something as big and important as real estate, a handshake deal just isn't good enough. It must be in writing to be enforceable. So that verbal agreement you made to sell your house, a court won't touch it. They demand proof on paper. Okay, so let's assume we've got a healthy, valid, written contract and it's now in its executory phase. Well, now the clock starts ticking and the rules of the game become incredibly important. I want you to burn these 5 words into your brain. Time is of the essence. When you see this phrase in a contract, it changes everything. Suddenly, all those dates for inspections, financing, and closing are no longer just friendly suggestions. They become hard, absolute, drop-dead deadlines. Miss one by a day, even an hour, and boom, you could be in breach of contract. And just look at the difference this makes. Without that clause, a closing date of June 1st usually means on or around June 1st. A court would allow for a reasonable time. But with that clause, June 1st means June 1st, period. If you're not ready to close, the other party can terminate the deal on June 2nd, no questions asked. It is a total game changer. So you might be wondering, how does this all work now that we sign everything on a screen? The answer lies in 2 key laws, the Federal e-Sign Act and, at the state level, the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, or UETA.
Together, these are what give your electronic signature the exact same legal power as pen on paper. They are the legal backbone that makes the whole digital real estate world go round. But, even with all these rules and digital signatures, sometimes things just go wrong. A promise gets broken, and that leads us directly into the anatomy of a contract breach.
It's really a pretty straightforward chain reaction. First, someone doesn't do what they promised to do. Second, because of that failure, the contract is terminated. It's over. And third, the person who was harmed by that broken promise now gets to seek a legal remedy for their trouble.
So, what exactly is a breach? Well, it's just a violation of the contract's terms without a valid legal excuse. Maybe the buyer couldn't get the loan. Maybe the seller refused to make the repairs they agreed to. Whatever happened, a promise was broken, and now there are going to be consequences.
And that brings us to the final act in our contract's life story, the fallout. When a deal dies because someone broke their promise, somebody has to pay the price. Generally, when we're talking about money, courts can award a few different types of damages. First, there are compensatory damages. That's money to cover the actual loss you suffered. Then there are liquidated damages, which is an amount that everyone pre-agreed to in the contract itself. And finally, you have punitive damages. Now, these are super rare in contract cases. They aren't to compensate you, they're to punish the other party for some really bad behavior, like fraud. So let's look at another classic exam trap. A buyer defaults. The seller now faces a choice, an election of remedies. Option A is to simply keep the buyer's earnest money deposit. That's a form of those liquidated, pre-agreed damages we just mentioned. Option B is to refuse the earnest money and sue the buyer for their actual compensatory damages, which could be much more. And here is the absolute most crucial point you have to remember. You can't do both. You have to pick one. If that seller chooses to pocket the earnest money, the contract almost always says that this is their sole and exclusive remedy. That's it. Case closed. They give up their right to go to court and ask for more. So there you have it, the entire life of a real estate contract, from its birth to its potential death and the messy aftermath. The legal rules are pretty black and white, but it leaves you with a bigger question, doesn't it? The clauses and deadlines are clear, but people are complicated. How many of these legal train wrecks could be avoided altogether before they ever start, with just a simple phone call or some clear communication?